question mostly for Suzanne and Leslie.
Yes. No, just kidding.
I'm Kayla Race. I've emailed with Suzanne about I'm applying for a loan internship. And I'm graduating in May, and I'm interested in working on the creative studio side of it, joint major with studio art and environmental studies. But like I don't have any experience with all the digital computer stuff because it's not offered here. So do you have any advice on which sections within advertising I should be looking at?
It's tough because this kind of, in some ways, comes back to a portfolio. Yeah. In terms of maybe you've done some studio classes and you can, maybe there's a class at UVM that you can take. Maybe there's a class at Middlebury High that's offered like adult education in Flash development design. I think when you're trying to, you're somewhat focused, but you sort of need a little bit more of the foundation. It's like, okay, where can you get that foundation? Maybe it's you start in the general studio of an advertising department, and at night you take a course and, you know, give up some of your nighttime hours to sort of build that portion of your portfolio. It is hard. I mean, there are definitely going to be some, you know, when people were talking about, oh, BU or Northwestern, there's a pipeline in, just because they do have those programs that, just as I took, you know, Milton Chaucer, Shakespeare, they have all those courses that are part of the curriculum. So my best advice would be try and think about how can I build my portfolio? What kind of classes do I need? Maybe there's University of Phoenix online and you can do something. Maybe there's a professor who is more into the digital side, or someone who works in the computer. It used to be voter, I doubt it's even in existence. Maybe there's someone in the computer sciences department who could guide you there. But I'd start talking to professors. I'd start doing some research about are there any classes nearby that you could take.
And you could find out what the programs, I mean, the technology is amazing. It keeps changing, but I know that, you know, there's an ad side, there's an edit side, and then there's the creative side. They use specific computer programs. Like the entire magazine is done, you know, on computers now. So what they're using now is something called InDesign. If you're an editor, you need to know InCopy, and not know InCopy, you know, I mean, no one knew it until you start working on it. And InDesign, you have to know InDesign. If you're going to be in any way someone who's a visual person, you just have, like, that's how they do everything.
And some people have taught themselves. They'll literally get like InDesign for dummies. I mean, you do the research, do the Google, do the Amazon, do what you got to do to get sort of do it yourself. Like that's how when I was first getting my internships, I found them on my own. And now your challenge is a little bit greater if you're actually. I mean, it's in some ways it's a language you're trying to learn, but you got to figure out, okay, what do I need to learn this language? And whether it's, you know, buying the CDs or maybe the library has them, but you got to sort of build that so your foundation actually gets more cemented.
Yes.
This is probably a follow-up to Kayla's question. A couple of you have talked about grad school, and for those of us who are interested in the reporting side of things or the editorial side of things, I hear a lot of conflicting advice as to whether or not journalism school is a good investment of both time and money. Would you recommend going that route, or would you recommend just getting in somewhere small and building those clippings and kind of working your way up?
Journalism school is very expensive now. Columbia used to be just a one-year program. It was expensive then. I lived in Brooklyn. I took the subway, and occasionally I would bike to Columbia, and it was really a long way. And in the winter, even living in Middlebury for 3 years, it was just too cold. But I would say, I mean, if you can either A, afford it, or B, get some kind of financial aid, nowadays, going there is a great way to get a concentrated dose of the skills that you do need. I think telling stories in every medium is important, and knowing how to basically do it is very important too, because you'll be called upon to do it. Portfolio Magazine has a website with video, and I met with the executive editor Shasta Nessa, and we talked a little bit, and they're trying to figure out their digital video strategy. And it's more than just writing. So I mean, writing's at the core, but everyone needs the skills if you're going to be a content side. And that's something that schools now, graduate schools can deliver. But just do your homework and see who's doing it best.
I mean, I'm probably the flip side of that. I didn't go to grad school. I saved some money, not going obviously, but I don't know. I mean, I don't think it hurts. I'll say that. I mean, if I see someone as Columbia School of Journalism on the resume, it's like, oh, you must be kind of smart. Like, obviously, you're. That's great. I didn't do it. I did it. I learned totally. I learned doing the job. Like, I spent, you know, I mean, when I start writing for the New York Times, I write for the city section. The city section is something you only get if you're in New York City. Just sort of covers. It's on in the Sunday paper and covers, you know, just sort of quirky little profiles and stories about New York City. I had this story that I wanted to write about. I was an editorial assistant at the time, and I wanted to write the story about how I noticed in all the bodegas, which are delis, I guess, whatever. The delis in all the neighborhoods, if you walk into them, you see cats. You always see cats hanging out in these, you know, which is like, you know, against like, you know, rules and regulations. Some of them were pets, some of them were like really fat, meaning they were like, you know, mousers basically. And I'm like, what's the deal with these cats? So I pitched the story, I'm like, and they thought it was so weird and great, like, great, do this story. So I basically spent weeks going all around New York City, into the Bronx, into Queens, going, and like, you know, I didn't have a journalism strict education, so like, my reporting style was all basically like fly-by. I mean, I was just sort of like, hey, what's your cat doing here? You know, and sometimes it'd be like, you know, sometimes it'd be like, who are you know, and I'd have to kind of finesse it. Sometimes I would just hang out there, and I just sort of figured it out, you know, and I just, you know, there's certain basics which you learn about, you know, obviously always write everything down, and, you know, and if you're taping someone, tell them you're tape recording them. I mean, there's basics that you pick up, but I was, you know, I was 24 years old, and I was just running around the city interviewing all these people about their cats in these delis, and it became a cover story for the city section, and, you know, I think they called it like my cat the assassin or something, and it was like this story about how basically they're using them as mousers, you know, and it was controversial because they weren't supposed to have the cats, so some of the, you know, they, you know, denied it afterwards, but it ended up being, that to me was a learning experience, because I didn't go to graduate school and learn how to do that, but I just was like, I just had to learn while I was on it. So after I got that first story, then they started giving me stories. So I would continue to pitch. You know, when I saw something quirky going on in New York City, I'd say, hey, can I do a story on this? But they also figured out what my style was, so they would start pitching me, and that's how the relationship formed. So yes, if I had gotten a grad degree, I might have gotten the connections, and I might have had that more sort of really nuts and bolts, like how to be a reporter. But I think you can learn that on the job. I think if you're scrappy enough and you're just like, you know, you'll get rejection. That's the other thing I really want to emphasize. You will get lots of rejection if you want to be a writer, reporter. Like, I pitch still to this day. I have to pitch stories, and they're like, yeah, if someone just did that or we're not interested, like, you can't get demoralized. You like, just keep going. It's like you just gotta, you know, so just because you get one great New York Times piece doesn't mean your career is going to take off. Like, you still have to pitch. You still got to put yourself out there. But I feel like it's not, I think the grad degree is great, but I don't think it's necessary.
And I'll just echo that too. I you know, have a lot of contacts in journalism. A lot of people, a lot of them, like Paul, went to liberal arts college and then went to grad school, and they say it was indispensable. Others, like Carolyn, say, you know, I made it my own.
And I wanted to say, I'm sorry, was that when I went, the technology was not there.
Right.
And the stuff that I learned to report in audio, to edit, and TV stuff, it's completely different now. Yeah. I think the technology is there to give you the skills for now. It wasn't there then, and I had to learn that on the job.
So we have about 3 minutes before we have 3 to 5 minutes before we have to be out of this room. So I'll wrap things up here. If you guys want to chat with the folks, it's a great opportunity. They're kind of a captive audience now. So thanks everyone else for coming.